Parent of killers, what's your story? Most of my family is 99% certain that my cousin murdered his best friend when they were about 12. He's always been a very strange kid, prone to fits of violence. He once tried to beat my other cousin with a canoe, or for splashing him, and his dad has done time for child molestation. The two of them were alone by a river. My cousin came back and very calmly told his parents that his friend had drowned. The kid had evidence of blunt force trauma to the head, but my cousin said that he had slipped and fell. The DA and medical experts attested that it was not a wound that would have been caused merely by a slip and fall, but my cousin had a great lawyer and got off. I don't hang around that side of the family anymore, for several reasons. Scary to think that he is a free man. My great aunt was dating this guy and this guy really wanted to have sex with her. It was 1930s Italy in a remote town. Sex before marriage even to a fiancé basically made you an instant town slut. Anyway, he promised to marry her if they did, and she said yes. Well, a few days later she sees him flirting with another woman, so she goes home, grabs her father's gun and kills him in the streets after luring him in. She only got a few years in prison and moved to Toronto a year later. Happily married with 5 kids. My son killed a family friend when he was 17. The family friend had been molesting him from 7 to 12 before finding other boys. When he was 17, he ran across this man who propositioned him for sex and my son lost it. He stabbed him in the heart with a knife and he had a heart attack and died. He did 8 years for manslaughter. His life is a wreck. He got out and wanted to go to college and get a job. College was too much for him because he was around kids his age who were more concerned about what to do on Saturday night, whereas he was worried about his parole officer showing up with 8 armed cops at our house. He completed his degree in psychology and still couldn't find a job. He couldn't even find a job at organizations that help ex-convicts because he couldn't pass a background check. He started to be unhinged and committed suicide, and he died believing that he did something wrong and to have deserved the life that he got. I was 3. My grandparents had full custody of me. My dad was a heavy drug user and alcoholic. From my understanding, my mom was to an extent, but my dad was way worse. My mom also had a lot of health issues. I'm not sure all the details of her health. She was bipolar for sure, and was on several heavy meds which she often let my dad use. She had a disability with one of her hands, but she was a very beautiful and kind woman. She was the kind of person, if she had $10 and went to the store, everyone was gonna get something when she got home. My dad killed her one night. Not sure the story of that. All I know is that he chopped her up partly. Couldn't fully dismember her, but he tried. I think he got her head partly off and an arm and made a big gash from hip to hip. He hid her in our trailer closet for 3 days. My grandpa eventually suspected that it happened and called the cops. According to neighbors, the next day he came over and drank beer and watched football and didn't even seem to be a changed person at all. I'm now 21. My dad is gonna be serving at least another 8 to 10 years in prison. He had the chance for parole after 15 years and was denied, but he could serve his whole life. Up until I was 18. I couldn't visit him. I didn't really like to, but I did it to make my family happy. I didn't know how to feel about him, and still don't tbh. I had my visitation rights taken away at 18. Since I was a victim of his crimes, I could have it overturned, but not really wanting to honestly. He only calls when he wants money, gets well over $1,000 a year from my grandma. I was lied and told it was basically an accidental death until I googled my dad's name when I was 11. I didn't speak to him for over a year, and it was right before Christmas too. My first memory is seeing my mum's grey blue closed casket. Obligatory, not my kid, but my stepdad's kid, which we will call Jay. He went on a murder spree. He wanted to kill all his family members. He successfully killed both his maternal and fraternal grandfathers. He got caught midway through the murder spree cause he left his great aunt alive and tied up. She got free after he left and called the police, and his mom, who was next on the list. Jay stole his great aunt's phone so he could pretend to be her and meet up with his mom. He ended up meeting the police instead. He had tried going to other relatives' homes, but it was in the middle of the workday and people weren't home. Otherwise he would have killed more before getting caught. He got 100 years with 0 chances of parole. The judge said the sentence was symbolic because by the time it's over, there won't be anyone left alive to remember his heinous acts. Edit. I forgot to mention how it's impacted my stepdad. He turned into an alcoholic 4 years afterwards. He did everything he could to help his son be a good person and feels like he failed. He blames himself. His son Jay is criminally insane and had shown that countless times over the course of his life. Shit, Jay tried to burn down his school when he was in kindergarten. He had already gone to jail for attempted murder up in Alaska too. Only in the last year or two really has my stepdad gotten any better. He's finally getting close again with his daughter, and the drinking has slowed some in part due to my mom. I just wish he would go to therapy and get proper help. It's unlike him to seek that kind of treatment though, cause he is a very private person and that goes against his nature. Not me, but my mother was in a relationship with a serial killer / pedophile. In the early to mid 80s my mom started dating this guy. She already had my older sister with another man. New boyfriend was a doting stepdad. They lived in Las Vegas. My mom ran Keno, and he was a card counter. She'd help disguise him because he was blacklisted from most casinos for the aforementioned card counting. I came along. They continued to be the happy little super dysfunctional family until the FBI grabs my mom from work and interrogates her for hours about him. He's a rapist / pedophile / murder. My mom didn't know. She dabbled in low-level criminality, but not that stuff. Splits town with us kids. Gets back with older sister's dad. I grow up not knowing this until I'm 14 and my parents divorce and dad asks for a DNA test for me and I'm floored. Your dad isn't your dad, it's actually this evil man who's on death row. My mom's a huge drunk and drug addict. She can't even speak to me about this without a full-fledged mental breakdown, so everything I know is spotty. She passed away 4 years ago. I'm going through her stuff and find some letters from the History Channel contacting her to participate in a documentary about him. One thing that chills me to my core, he used to call her his first victim's name during sex. She swore she never knew until after the fact, and I believe her. My uncle raped and murdered his disabled daughter and tried to frame someone else so he could collect insurance money. He got away with it for almost 20 years. One day, I get a phone call from my dad saying that we should expect the family name in the news and why. She was mid-teens and developmentally disabled. He tried to frame a supposed hitchhiker serial killer in the 80s. Tried to follow the same patterns. He was caught via a cold case study. Early tests had some of his DNA on her, but protection was used during the rape, and he had a passable alibi at the time. When some of the DNA was retested, they found more clues linking my uncle to the murder, and after checking with said alibi, the person who gave it confessed that they lied. The moment the police came for my uncle, he cried and thanked them for catching him. He admitted the whole thing right away and said that he couldn't handle her anymore, took out the life insurance policy, and did as he did. He is in jail for life and getting at least part of what he deserves there. He has been disowned by literally every member of the family, and 2 of his nephews have changed at least part of their name. That was from his ex-fiancée of 7 years together. He started doing meth without me knowing. 5 years and 2 kids in. Tried to get him help. When I found out, left him because he refused it. They caught him in his victim's car. He confessed 12 days into his trial. Got life plus 10. Said he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone. I'm raising our 2 kids. They don't know yet. Don't plan on telling them until they're old enough. Kills me that they will have to live with a burden like that. It's massively unfair. They certainly don't deserve it, and neither did the victim or his family. Off the meth. He was the type of person that would help the homeless, generous, outgoing, excessively intelligent and ambitious. How heavy drugs can change people into monsters. When I was 10 or 11, my younger brother and I were visiting our grandparents. Hanging out in the hotel, we were told that our mother had passed and our dad was going to jail. It took a while to realize what happened. I got the full story when I was 15. Dad was sleeping. Mom tried to suffocate him with a pillow. He ended up switching it around onto her, resulting in her death. According to newspaper articles, he hid her body in the woods, and according to the police, they would not have found the body unless my dad told them. He was sentenced to like 15 years in prison. He got out of prison 5 years ago or so, gets caught up in the pharmaceutical drugs, which led to harder things, and ends up getting some heroin with fentanyl laced in it, and ODs. I turned out okay. I have a hard time expressing feelings in my relationship, but my fiance loves me and works with me. Did you have any idea that their relationship was so bad beforehand? Did you ever speak to your dad afterwards? I'm sorry for your loss. Yeah, we hung out a few times. When he got out of prison, he wanted me to be a son figure to him, and he wanted to be a dad to me. But after 10+ years he felt more like a friend. I don't really remember how it was beforehand. I think I blocked out any memories from then. My stepson killed one of his bullies in high school. He has a cleft palate, and it's a pretty bad one. All his life he's been bullied for it. His mother and I have done everything we could to stop the bullying, but it never ceased. We contacted administrators, moved, switched schools, tried everything. Eventually, we decided on an online homeschooling program. Unfortunately, one of his bullies from his last school knew where we lived. He'd come by and taunt my stepson regularly. My wife and I were never around because the kid would come while we were working. One day, after my son tried ignoring his previous taunting, the bully figured it must have been a good idea to break in and find him. He threw a brick through our back window, which was in the guest bedroom, and proceeded to attempt to enter. Now, I partially blame myself for what happened next. My son never knew his real father, and so since I've come in, I've done everything in my power to fill in, and we grew pretty close. I ended up trusting him enough to tell him where I kept my gun. Seeing as how his mother and I worked so often, I wanted him to be able to protect himself if anything were to happen, if we were gone. So, he grabs my gun, opens the door to where the bully was, and shot him in the chest twice. He died before the ambulance reached the scene. My son was never charged for anything, as there was obvious evidence of a forced entry, and the neighbors claim that the bully repeatedly said he was gonna kill my son when he got inside. This happened almost 10 years ago, when my son was 15. He's been to so many different psychologists and therapists since then. Something in him changed that day, like he blamed himself. For years he tried to isolate himself from the world. He became a heavy alcoholic, and even attempted suicide. He blames himself for taking another human's life, even though he knows his was in danger. Seeing what happened to my boy, it's heartbreaking. I sold the gun, never got another one. To this day, he still has that look of grief and guilt in his eyes. I'm starting to believe no amount of tears will ever wash it away. My great aunt killed her husband years and years ago, shot him and burned the house down after years of being abused by him. From what I know, she was convicted, but didn't get jail time. Instead she came in and worked in the prison kitchen, so she could go home and take care of their kids every day. Most of her kids ended up involved in drugs and the like, so my part of the family has never interacted with them, and we don't really talk about it. My brother killed his girlfriend shortly after their son was born. He still won't tell us why he did it, but he did confess, and has never once denied doing it. He's in prison until 2046 last I checked. We always knew growing up that he'd end up in legal trouble eventually, but not as early, and it did. Curious what the signs were? I know recognizing them in hindsight and seeing it unfold are different things. Trying to intervene or getting someone help is probably even harder. Most would end up thinking you are the one with the problem or just being dramatic. The anger issues. And he dropped therapy when he legally became an adult, which doesn't help. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below and subscribe for more.